It is a pleasure to have you with us at the English Story Journal. Grab a coffee, find a quiet spot, and let's get lost in the story.
Marilla put her knitting down. She leaned back in her chair. Her eyes were tired. It was almost dark. The evening had come to Green Gables. The only light in the kitchen came from the red flames in the stove. Anne sat on the rug, looking into the fire. She had been reading that her book was now on the floor. She was dreaming with a smile on her lips. She imagined wonderful adventures that always ended well. Marilla looked at Anne. She felt a deep love, but she could not show it easily. She loved this thin, gray-eyed girl very much. Her love made her afraid of being too soft, so she was often stricter with Anne. Anne did not know how much Marilla loved her. She sometimes thought Marilla was hard to please, but Anne always stopped this thought, remembering what she owed Marilla. "Anne," Marilla said suddenly, "Miss Stacy was here this afternoon when you were out with Diana." Anne came back from her dreams with a start and a sigh. "Was she? Oh, I'm so sorry I wasn't here. Why didn't you call me, Marilla? Diana and I were only in the haunted wood. It's lovely in the woods now. All the little plants have gone to sleep, like someone tucked them under a blanket of leaves until spring." Diana didn't say much about that, though. Diana never forgot the scolding her mother gave her for imagining ghosts in the haunted wood. It had a bad effect on Diana's imagination. "Diana and I are seriously thinking of promising each other that we will never marry. We will be nice old maids and live together forever. Diana hasn't quite decided, though. She thinks maybe it would be better to marry some wild, bad young man and make him good. Diana and I talk a lot about serious things now, you know. We feel we are much older than we used to be. It's not right to talk about childish matters. It's a very serious thing to be almost 14, Marilla. Miss Stacy took all of us girls who are teenagers down to the Brook last Wednesday. She talked to us about it. She said we must be careful of our habits and what we want in life. By the time we are 20, our character will be set. And if our character is not strong, we can't build anything good on it. Diana and I talked about it on the way home from school. We felt very serious, Marilla. We decided to be very careful. We will form good habits and learn all we can. We will be as sensible as possible, so by the time we are 20, our character will be strong. It's scary to think of being 20, Marilla. But why was Miss Stacy here this afternoon?" "That is what I want to tell you, Anne, if you'll ever let me speak. She was talking about you." "About me?" Anne looked a little scared. Then she turned red and said, "Oh, I know what she was saying. I meant to tell you, Marilla. Honestly, I did, but I forgot. Miss Stacy caught me reading Ben-Hur in school yesterday afternoon. I should have been studying my Canadian history. Jane Andrews lent it to me. I was reading it at dinner time. I had just got to the chariot race when school started. I really wanted to know what happened, so I put the history book on my desk, but I was reading Ben-Hur under it. I just looked like I was studying history, you know, but I was really enjoying Ben-Hur. I was so interested that I didn't see Miss Stacy come until she was looking at me, so disappointed. I can't tell you how ashamed I felt, Marilla, especially when I heard Josie Pye giggling. Miss Stacy took Ben-Hur away, but she didn't say a word then. She kept me inside during break and talked to me. She said I did two things wrong. First, I was wasting time that I should use for studies. Second, I was tricking my teacher by making it seem I was reading history when it was a storybook. I didn't know until that moment, Marilla, that what I was doing was deceitful. I was shocked. I cried a lot and asked Miss Stacy to forgive me. I said I would never do such a thing again. I offered to not even look at Ben-Hur for a whole week, but Miss Stacy said she didn't need that and she forgave me freely. So I think it wasn't very kind of her to come here to you about it after all. Miss Stacy never mentioned such a thing to me, Anne. It's only your guilty feeling that is the problem. You should not take storybooks to school. You read too many novels anyway. When I was a girl, I was not allowed to even look at a novel. Oh, how can you call Ben-Hur a novel when it's really such a religious book? Protested Anne. Of course, it's a little too exciting for Sunday reading, and I only read it on weekdays. And I never read any book now unless Miss Stacy or Mrs. Allen thinks it is a good book for a girl of 13 3/4 to read. Miss Stacy made me promise that. She found me reading a book one day called The Lurid Mystery of the Haunted Hall. Ruby Gillis had lent it to me. Oh, Marilla, it was so fascinating and creepy, but Miss Stacy said it was a very silly, bad book. She asked me not to read any more of it or any like it. I didn't mind promising not to read any more like it, but it was hard to give back that book without knowing how it ended. But I wanted to please Miss Stacy, so I did it. It's amazing what you can do when you really want to please someone. Well, I guess I'll light the lamp and get to work, said Marilla. I see clearly that you don't want to hear what Miss Stacy had to say. You are more interested in talking yourself than in anything else. Oh, indeed, Marilla, I do want to hear it, cried Anne, sadly. I won't say another word, not one. I know I talk too much, but I am really trying to stop, and if you only knew how many things I want to say and don't, you'd give me some credit for it. Please tell me, Marilla. Well, Miss Stacy wants to start a class for her best students. They want to study for the entrance exam to Queen's College. She plans to give them extra lessons for an hour after school, and she came to ask Matthew and me if we would like you to join it. What do you think about it, Anne? Would you like to go to Queen's and become a teacher? Oh, Marilla. Anne knelt up and clasped her hands. It's been my dream for the last 6 months, ever since Ruby and Jane began to talk of studying for the entrance. But I didn't say anything about it because I thought it would be useless. I'd love to be a teacher, but won't it be very expensive? Mr. Andrews says it cost him $150 for Prissy to go, and Prissy was good at geometry. I guess you don't need to worry about that. When Matthew and I took you in, we decided we would do our best for you and give you a good education. I believe a girl should be able to earn her own living, whether she ever has to or not. You'll always have a home at Green Gables as long as Matthew and I are here. But no one knows what will happen in this world, and it's good to be ready. So you can join the Queen's class if you like, Anne. Oh, Marilla, thank you. Anne hugged Marilla's waist and looked up at her face. I'm very thankful to you and Matthew, and I'll study as hard as I can. I'll do my best to make you proud. I warn you not to expect much in geometry, but I think I can do well in everything else if I work hard. I dare say you'll do well enough. Miss Stacy says you are bright and work hard. Marilla would never tell Anne exactly what Miss Stacy had said about her. That would make Anne too proud. You don't need to kill yourself studying. There is no hurry. You won't be ready for the entrance exam for 1.5 years, but it's good to start on time and learn everything well, Miss Stacy says. I will be more interested in my studies now because I have a purpose in life. Mr. Allen says everyone should have a purpose in life and follow it truly. Only, he says, we must first be sure it is a good purpose. I would call it a good purpose to want to be a teacher like Miss Stacy. Wouldn't you, Marilla? I think it's a very noble job. The Queen's class started soon. Gilbert Blythe, Anne Shirley, Ruby Gillis, Jane Andrews, Josie Pye, Charlie Sloane, and Moody Spurgeon McPherson joined it. Diana Barry did not join. Her parents did not plan to send her to Queen's. This felt like a disaster to Anne. Since Minnie May had been sick, Anne and Diana had never been apart in anything important. On the evening when the Queen's class stayed for extra lessons, Anne saw Diana go out alone. Anne had to try very hard to stay in her seat and not run after her friend. A lump came into her throat, and she hid her face behind her Latin book to hide the tears. Anne did not want Gilbert Blythe or Josie Pye to see her cry. But oh, Marilla, I really felt that I had tasted the bitterness of death, as Mr. Allen said in his sermon last Sunday, when I saw Diana go out alone, she said sadly that night. I thought how wonderful it would have been if Diana had been studying for the entrance, too. But we can't have everything perfect in this imperfect world, as Mrs. Lynde says. Mrs. Lynde isn't always comforting, but she says many true things. And I think the Queen's class is going to be very interesting. Jane and Ruby are just going to study to be teachers. That is all they want. Ruby says she will only teach for 2 years after she finishes, and then she plans to get married. Jane says she will teach her whole life and never marry, because you are paid a salary for teaching, but a husband won't pay you anything and complains if you ask for money from the eggs and butter. I expect Jane speaks from sad experience. Josie Pye says she's just going to college for education. She won't have to earn her own living. Moody Spurgeon is going to be a minister. Mrs. Lynde says he couldn't be anything else with a name like that. I hope it isn't wrong of me, Marilla, but the thought of Moody Spurgeon being a minister makes me laugh. He's such a funny-looking boy, but perhaps he will look more clever when he grows up. Charlie Sloane says he's going to go into politics and be a member of Parliament, but Mrs. Lynde says he'll never succeed at that because the Sloanes are all honest people. What is Gilbert Blythe going to be? Asked Marilla, seeing that Anne was opening her Caesar book. I don't know what Gilbert Blythe wants to be, if he wants to be anything, said Anne scornfully. There was open rivalry between Gilbert and Anne now. Before, the rivalry was mostly from Anne, but now Gilbert was just as determined to be first in class as Anne was. He was a strong competitor. The other students knew that Anne and Gilbert were the best. Since the day by the pond when she had refused to forgive him, Gilbert had ignored Anne. He talked and joked with the other girls. He shared books and puzzles with them. He discussed lessons and plans. Sometimes he walked home with one of them. But Anne Shirley he simply ignored. Anne found out that being ignored was not pleasant. She told herself that she did not care, but deep down she knew she cared. If she could go back to that day by the pond, she would answer him differently. Suddenly, she realized that her old anger against him was gone. It was gone just when she needed it most. Anne realized that she had forgiven him and forgotten the anger without knowing it, but it was too late. And at least neither Gilbert nor anyone else, not even Diana, should ever know how sorry she was and how much she wished she hadn't been so proud. She decided to hide her feelings. She did it so well that Gilbert, who perhaps was not as uncaring as he seemed, could not guess how Anne felt. The only comfort he had was that she was always mean to Charlie Sloane. The winter passed quickly with pleasant duties and studies. Anne was happy, eager, interested. There were lessons to learn and delightful books to read. There were new songs to practice for the Sunday school choir. There were pleasant Saturday afternoons at the minister's house with Mrs. Allen. And then, almost before Anne knew it, spring had come again to Green Gables.
Studies became a little boring then. The Queen's class stayed inside while others went out. They looked out the windows and felt that Latin and French were not as interesting as before. Even Anne and Gilbert became less interested. Teachers and students were all glad when the school term ended and vacation days began. "But you've done good work this past year," Miss Stacy told them on the last evening, "and you deserve a good, fun vacation. Have the best time you can outdoors. Get lots of health and energy and ambition to help you next year. It will be the hardest year, you know, the last year before the entrance exam." "Are you going to be back next year, Miss Stacy?" asked Josie Pye. The rest of the class was thankful Josie asked, as there had been rumors that Miss Stacy was not coming back next year. The Queen's class listened, waiting for her answer. "Yes, I think I will," said Miss Stacy. "I thought of taking another school, but I have decided to come back to Avonlea. To tell the truth, I've become so interested in my students here that I found I couldn't leave them, so I'll stay and help you finish." "Hurrah!" said Moody Spurgeon. "Oh, I'm so glad," said Anne with shining eyes. Dear Miss Stacy, it would be perfectly dreadful if you didn't come back. I don't believe I could have the heart to go on with my studies at all if another teacher came here. When Anne got home that night, she put all her textbooks away in an old trunk in the attic. She locked it and threw the key into the blanket box. I'm not even going to look at a school book during vacation, she told Marilla. I studied very hard all term. I know geometry by heart. I just feel tired of everything serious. I'm going to let my imagination run wild for the summer. Oh, you needn't be alarmed, Marilla. I'll only let it run wild within reasonable limits. But I want to have a really good, fun time this summer. Maybe it's the last summer I'll be a little girl. Mrs. Lynde says I will need longer skirts next year, and when I wear longer skirts, I will feel I have to act very grown up. I'm afraid I won't even believe in fairies then. So I'm going to believe in them with all my heart this summer. I think we're going to have a very happy vacation. Ruby Gillis is going to have a birthday party soon, and there's the Sunday school picnic and the missionary concert next month, and Mr. Barry says that one evening he'll take Diana and me to the White Sands Hotel for dinner. Jane Andrews went there last summer. She said it was amazing to see the electric lights and the flowers and all the ladies in beautiful dresses. Mrs. Lynde came up the next afternoon to find out why Marilla had not been at the aid meeting on Thursday. Marilla explained, Matthew had a bad heart attack on Thursday, and I didn't want to leave him. Oh, yes, he's all right again now, but it happens more often than it used to, and I worry about him. The doctor says he must be careful to avoid stress. That's easy enough, for Matthew doesn't look for stress. But he's not to do any very heavy work either, and you might as well tell Matthew not to breathe as not to work. Come and take off your coat, Rachel. Will you stay for tea? Well, since you ask so kindly, perhaps I might as well stay, said Mrs. Rachel, who was happy to stay. Mrs. Rachel and Marilla sat comfortably in the parlor. Anne got the tea and made hot biscuits that were so good even Mrs. Rachel liked them.
I must say, Anne has turned out a really clever girl, admitted Mrs. Rachel as Marilla walked with her to the end of the lane at sunset. She must be a great help to you. She is, said Marilla, and she's very steady and reliable now. I used to be afraid she'd never get over her silly ways, but she has, and I wouldn't be afraid to trust her with anything now. I never would have thought she'd turn out so well on that first day I was here 3 years ago, said Mrs. Rachel. Goodness, shall I ever forget that tantrum of hers? I was mistaken in judging Anne, but it was no wonder, for there was never a stranger, more surprising child in this world. It's wonderful how she's improved these 3 years, especially in how she looks. She's become a really pretty girl. But somehow, I don't know how it is, but when Anne and they are together, even though Anne isn't half as handsome, she makes them look plain. Anne had a good summer, living outdoors with Diana in Lover's Lane. Marilla let Anne go out. The Spencervale doctor saw Anne, shook his head, and sent a message. It was, "Keep that red-headed girl of yours in the open air all summer and don't let her read books until she gets more spring into her step." This message frightened Marilla. She thought Anne would get sick. So Anne had a golden summer, walking, rowing, dreaming. In September, she was bright-eyed, energetic, and ambitious. "I feel just like studying with might and main," she said, bringing books from the attic. "Oh, you good old friends, I'm glad to see your honest faces once more. Yes, even you, geometry. I've had a perfectly beautiful summer, Marilla, and now I'm rejoicing as a strong man to run a race, as Mr. Allen said last Sunday. Doesn't Mr. Allen preach magnificent sermons? Mrs. Lynde says he's improving every day, and the first thing we know, some city church will gobble him up, and then we'll be left and have to turn to and break in another green preacher. But I don't see the use of meeting trouble halfway, do you, Marilla? I think it would be better just to enjoy Mr. Allen while we have him. If I were a man, I think I'd be a minister. They can have such an influence for good if their theology is sound, and it must be thrilling to preach splendid sermons and stir your hearers' hearts. Why can't women be ministers, Marilla? I asked Mrs. Lynde that, and she was shocked and said it would be a scandalous thing. She said there might be female ministers in the States, and she believed there was, but thank goodness we hadn't got to that stage in Canada yet, and she hoped we never would. But I don't see why. I think women would make splendid ministers. When there is a social to be got up, or a church tea, or anything else to raise money, the women have to turn to and do the work. I'm sure Mrs. Lynde can pray every bit as well as Superintendent Bell, and I've no doubt she could preach too with a little practice. Yes, I believe she could, said Marilla dryly. She does plenty of unofficial preaching as it is. Nobody has much of a chance to go wrong in Avonlea with Rachel to oversee them. Marilla, I want to tell you something and ask you what you think about it. It has worried me terribly. On Sunday afternoons, that is, when I think specially about such matters. I do really want to be good, and when I'm with you or Mrs. Allen or Miss Stacy, I want it more than ever, and I want to do just what would please you and what you would approve of. But mostly when I'm with Mrs. Lynde, I feel desperately wicked, and as if I wanted to go and do the very thing she tells me I oughtn't to do. I feel irresistibly tempted to do it. Now, what do you think is the reason I feel like that? Do you think it's because I'm really bad and unregenerate? Marilla laughed. If you are, I guess I am too, Anne, for Rachel often has that very effect on me. I sometimes think she'd have more of an influence for good, as you say yourself, if she didn't keep nagging people to do right. There should have been a special commandment against nagging. But there, I shouldn't talk so. Rachel is a good Christian woman, and she means well. There isn't a kinder soul in Avonlea, and she never shirks her share of work. I'm very glad you feel the same, said Anne. It's so encouraging. I shan't worry so much over that after this. But I dare say there'll be other things to worry me. They keep coming up new all the time, things to perplex you, you know? You settle one question, and there's another right after. There are so many things to be thought over and decided when you're beginning to grow up. It keeps me busy all the time thinking them over and deciding what is right. It's a serious thing to grow up, isn't it, Marilla? But when I have such good friends as you and Matthew and Mrs. Allen and Miss Stacy, I ought to grow up successfully, and I'm sure it will be my own fault if I don't. I feel it's a great responsibility because I only have the one chance. If I don't grow up right, I can't go back and begin over again. I've grown 2 inches this summer, Marilla. Mr. Gillis measured me at Ruby's party. I'm so glad you made my new dresses longer. That dark green one is so pretty, and it was sweet of you to put on the flounce. Of course, I know it wasn't really necessary, but flounces are so stylish this fall, and Josie Pye has flounces on all her dresses. I know I'll be able to study better because of mine. I shall have such a comfortable feeling deep down in my mind about that flounce. It's worth something to have that, said Marilla. Miss Stacy came back to school. Pupils were eager. The Queen's class prepared for the entrance test. Everyone was scared. This haunted Anne all winter. In bad dreams, she saw Gilbert Blythe's name at top, but not hers. It was a busy winter. Schoolwork was interesting. Anne learned much. Miss Stacy helped her class think and discover, surprising Mrs. Lynde and the board. Anne went out more. Marilla let Anne go to parties. Debating club held concerts, sleigh rides, and skating. Anne grew fast. Marilla was surprised Anne was taller. "Why, Anne, how you've grown," Marilla said, almost unbelievingly. She sighed, feeling sad. The child she loved had vanished. Anne was a tall, serious girl. She loved her, but felt a loss. That night, Marilla cried. Matthew saw her, looked worried. She laughed through her tears. "I was thinking about Anne," she explained. "She's got to be such a big girl, and she'll probably be away from us next winter. I'll miss her terrible." "She'll be able to come home often," comforted Matthew, who still saw Anne as the little girl he brought home. The branch railroad will be built to Carmody by that time. It won't be the same thing as having her here all the time, Marilla sighed. But there, men can't understand these things. Anne changed, becoming quieter. She thought and dreamed, but talked less. Marilla noticed. You don't chatter half as much as you used to, Anne, nor use half as many big words. What has come over you? Anne laughed, looking out the window. I don't know. I don't want to talk as much, she said, denting her chin thoughtfully with her forefinger. It's nicer to think dear, pretty thoughts and keep them in one's heart, like treasures. I don't like to have them laughed at or wondered over, and somehow I don't want to use big words anymore. It's almost a pity, isn't it, now that I'm really growing big enough to say them if I did want to? It's fun to be almost grown up in some ways, but it's not the kind of fun I expected, Marilla. There's so much to learn and do and think that there isn't time for big words. Besides, Miss Stacy says the short ones are much stronger and better. She makes us write all our essays as simply as possible. It was hard at first. I was so used to crowding in all the fine, big words I could think of, and I thought of any number of them. But I've got used to it now, and I see it's so much better. What has become of your story club? I haven't heard you speak of it for a long time. The story club isn't in existence any longer. We hadn't time for it, and anyhow, I think we had got tired of it. It was silly to be writing about love and murder and elopements and mysteries. Miss Stacy sometimes has us write a story for training in composition, but she won't let us write anything but what might happen in Avonlea in our own lives. And she criticizes it very sharply and makes us criticize our own, too. I never thought my compositions had so many faults until I began to look for them myself. I felt so ashamed I wanted to give up altogether, but Miss Stacy said I could learn to write well if I only trained myself to be my own severest critic, and so I am trying to. You've only 2 more months before the entrance, said Marilla. Do you think you'll be able to get through? Anne shivered. I don't know. Sometimes I think I'll be all right, and then I get horribly afraid. We've studied hard, and Miss Stacy has drilled us thoroughly, but we mayn't get through for all that. We've each got a stumbling block. Mine is geometry, of course, and Jane's is Latin, and Ruby and Charlie's is algebra, and Josie's is arithmetic. Moody Spurgeon says he feels it in his bones that he's going to fail in English history. Miss Stacy is going to give us examinations in June, just as hard as we'll have at the entrance, and mark us just as strictly, so we'll have some idea. I wish it was all over, Marilla. It haunts me. Sometimes I wake up in the night and wonder what I'll do if I don't pass. Why, go to school next year and try again, said Marilla, unconcernedly. Oh, I don't believe I'd have the heart for it. It would be such a disgrace to fail, especially if the others passed. And I get so nervous in an examination that I'm likely to make a mess of it. I wish I had nerves like Jane Andrews. Nothing rattles her. Anne sighed, looked away from the spring, and focused on her book. There would be other springs, but if she did not succeed in passing the entrance, Anne felt she would never enjoy them. June ended, and Miss Stacy was leaving Avonlea School. Anne and Diana walked home that evening, very sad. Their eyes were red, handkerchiefs wet. Miss Stacy's goodbyes made them cry, like Mr. Phillips' goodbyes 3 years ago. Diana looked back at the schoolhouse from the hill and sighed. It does seem as if it was the end of everything, doesn't it? She said sadly. You shouldn't feel half as badly as I do, said Anne, trying to find a dry spot on her handkerchief. You'll be back again next winter, but I suppose I've left the dear old school forever, if I have good luck, that is. It won't be a bit the same. Miss Stacy won't be there, nor you, nor Jane, nor Ruby, probably. I shall have to sit all alone, for I couldn't bear to have another desk mate after you. Oh, we have had jolly times, haven't we, Anne? It's dreadful to think they're all over." Two big tears rolled down Diana's face. "If you would stop crying, I could," said Anne. "Just as soon as I put away my hanky, I see you brimming up, and that starts me off again. As Mrs. Lynde says, if you can't be as cheerful as you can. After all, I dare say I'll be back next year. This is one of the times I know I'm not going to pass. They're getting alarmingly frequent." "Why, you came out splendidly in the exams Miss Stacy gave." "Yes, but those exams didn't make me nervous. When I think of the real thing, I get a horrid, cold, fluttery feeling in my heart. And then my number is 13, and Josie Pye says it's so unlucky. I am not superstitious, and I know it can make no difference. Still, I wish it wasn't 13. I do wish I was going in with you. Wouldn't we have a perfectly elegant time? But I suppose you'll have to cram in the evenings." "No, Miss Stacy made us promise not to open a book. She says it would only tire and confuse us. We must walk, not think about exams, and go to bed early. It's good advice, but hard to follow. Prissy Andrews told me she studied all night during her exam week. I wanted to study at least as long. It was kind of your Aunt Josephine to ask me to stay at Beechwood while I'm in town. You'll write to me while you're in, won't you?" "I'll write Tuesday night and tell you how the first day goes," promised Anne. "I'll be haunting the post office Wednesday," vowed Diana. Anne went to town on Monday. On Wednesday, Diana went to the post office, as they agreed, and got Anne's letter. "Dearest Diana," wrote Anne, "here it is Tuesday night, and I'm writing this in the library at Beechwood. Last night I was very lonely in my room. I wished so much you were with me. I couldn't cram because I'd promised Miss Stacy not to, but it was hard to not open my history book. This morning Miss Stacy came for me. We went to the academy. We picked up Jane, Ruby, and Josie. Ruby's hands were as cold as ice. Josie said I looked like I hadn't slept. She didn't believe I was strong enough to be a teacher, even if I passed. I still don't like Josie Pye very much." When we reached the academy, many students were there from all over the island. The first person we saw was Moody Spurgeon, sitting on the steps, talking to himself. Jane asked him what he was doing. He said he was repeating the multiplication table again and again to calm his nerves, asking us not to stop him. He said if he stopped, he got scared and forgot everything. The multiplication table kept all his facts in his head. When we went to our rooms, Miss Stacy had to leave us. Jane and I sat together. Jane was very calm. I wished I was calm like her. I wondered if I looked scared. I wondered if they could hear my heart beating. Then a man came in and gave us the English exam papers. My hands grew cold. My head whirled as I picked up the paper. It was one awful moment. "Diana, I felt just like I did 4 years ago when I asked Marilla if I could stay at Green Gables. Then my mind became clear. My heart started beating again. I knew I could do something with that paper." At noon, we went home for dinner. Then we went back for history in the afternoon. The history exam was hard. I got mixed up with the dates. Still, I think I did fairly well today. But oh, Diana, tomorrow is the geometry exam. When I think of it, I want so much to open my geometry book and study. I must try hard not to. If I thought the multiplication table would help, I would say it until tomorrow morning. I went to see the other girls this evening. On my way, I met Moody Spurgeon. He was walking around looking worried. He said he knew he failed history, and he was always a problem for his parents. He was going home on the morning train, saying it would be easier to be a carpenter than a minister. I cheered him up, telling him to stay until the end. I said it would be unfair to Miss Stacy if he didn't. Sometimes I wish I was a boy, but when I see Moody Spurgeon, I'm glad I'm a girl and not his sister. Ruby was crying a lot when I reached their boarding house. She had just found a big mistake in her English paper. When she felt better, we went out for ice cream. How we wished you had been with us. Oh, Diana, if only the geometry examination were over. But, as Mrs. Lynde would say, the sun will still rise and set whether I fail in geometry or not. That is true, but it doesn't comfort me much. I think I'd rather it didn't rise if I failed. Yours devotedly, Anne. The geometry exam and all the others were finally over. Anne arrived home on Friday evening, tired but a little happy. Diana was at Green Gables when Anne arrived. They met like they had not seen each other for years. You old darling, it's perfectly splendid to see you back again. It seems like an age since you went to town, and oh, Anne, how did you get along? Pretty well, I think, in everything but the geometry. I don't know whether I passed in it or not. I have a bad feeling I didn't. Oh, how good it is to be back. Green Gables is the dearest, loveliest aught in the world. How did the others do? The girls say they know they didn't pass, but I think they did pretty well. Josie says the geometry was so easy a child of 10 could do it. Moody Spurgeon still thinks he failed in history. Charlie says he failed in algebra, but we don't really know anything about it. We won't know until the pass list comes out. That won't be for 2 weeks. Imagine living 2 weeks in such suspense. I wish I could go to sleep and not wake up until it is over. Diana did not ask about Gilbert Blythe. She just said, "Oh, you'll pass all right, don't worry." "I'd rather not pass at all than not come out pretty well up on the list," said Anne. She meant that she wanted to be better than Gilbert Blythe. Diana knew this. If Anne was not better than Gilbert, her success would feel complete. Anne and Gilbert had worked hard during the exams. They had seen each other on the street many times, but did not speak. Each time, Anne held her head a little higher, wishing she had been friends with Gilbert when he asked her, and promising herself to beat him in the exam. Everyone in Avonlea wondered who would be first. Jimmy Glover and Ned Wright even had a bet. Josie Pye said Gilbert would surely be first. Anne felt that if she failed, it would be too hard to bear. Anne also wanted to do well for another good reason. She wanted to pass high for Matthew and Marilla, especially Matthew. Matthew believed she would beat the whole island. Anne felt this was too much to hope for, but she hoped very much that she would be among the first 10. Then she would see Matthew's kind eyes shine with pride. She felt that would be a sweet reward for all her hard work. After 2 weeks, Anne, Jane, Ruby, and Josie started going to the post office often, all worried. Anne opened the Charlottetown newspapers with shaking hands, feeling cold and scared. Charlie and Gilbert also went to the post office, but Moody Spurgeon stayed away. "I haven't got the grit to go there and look at a paper in cold blood," he told Anne. "I'm just going to wait until somebody comes and tells me suddenly whether I've passed or not." 3 weeks passed without the pass list. Anne felt she could not wait much longer. Her appetite failed, and her interest in Avonlea doings languished. Mrs. Lynde blamed the education leader. Matthew saw Anne was pale and quiet, walking slowly home from the post office every afternoon. He wondered if he should vote for a different party next election. But one evening, the news came. Anne was sitting at her open window, for a moment forgetting exams and worries. She watched the beautiful summer evening. The garden air smelled sweet. Poplars rustled softly. The sky was pink. Anne thought about colors. Then Diana came running fast through the trees, over the bridge, and up the hill with a newspaper in her hand. Anne stood up quickly, knowing what the paper held. The pass list was out. Her head whirled, her heart beat hard until it hurt. She could not move. It felt like an hour before Diana ran along the hall and burst into the room without knocking. So great was her excitement. "Anne, you've passed the very first. You and Gilbert both. You're ties, but your name is first. Oh, I'm so proud." Diana flung the paper on the table and herself on Anne's bed, utterly breathless. Anne lit the lamp, her hands shaking. She dropped the matchbox and used many matches before lighting it. Then she grabbed the paper. Yes, she had passed. Her name was at the very top of a list of 200. That moment was wonderful. "You did just splendidly, Anne," puffed Diana, recovering enough to sit up and speak. Anne, starry-eyed and rapt, had not uttered a word. "Father brought the paper home from Bright River just 10 minutes ago. It came out on the afternoon train, you know. It won't be here by mail until tomorrow. When I saw the pass list, I just ran over here like crazy. You've all passed, every one of you. Moody Spurgeon, too, though he has to take history again. Jane and Ruby did pretty well, halfway up the list, and so did Charlie. Josie just barely passed, with 3 marks to spare, but you'll see she'll act like she was first. Won't Miss Stacy be delighted? Oh, Anne, what does it feel like to see your name at the head of a pass list like that? If it were me, I know I'd go crazy with joy. I am pretty near crazy as it is, but you're as calm and cool as a spring evening." "I'm just dazzled inside," said Anne. "I want to say 100 things, but I can't find the words. I never dreamed of this. Yes, I did too, just once. I let myself think once, what if I should come out first? I thought it secretly, you know. It seemed too proud to think I could lead the island. Excuse me a minute, Diana. I must run right out to the field to tell Matthew. Then we'll go up the road and tell the good news to the others." They hurried to the hayfield below the barn where Matthew was putting hay into piles. Mrs. Lynde was talking to Marilla at the fence. "Oh, Matthew," exclaimed Anne, "I've passed, and I'm first, or one of the first. I'm not vain, but I'm thankful." "Well, now, I always said it," said Matthew, looking at the pass list happily. "I knew you could beat them all easy." "You've done pretty well, I must say, Anne," trying to hide her pride from Mrs. Rachel. But that good soul said heartily, "I just guess she has done well, and far be it from me to be backward in saying it. You're a credit to your friends, Anne, that's what, and we're all proud of you." That night, Anne, after a talk with Mrs. Allen, knelt by her open window. Moonlight shone brightly. She prayed a quiet prayer from her heart. She thanked God for the past and asked for good things in the future. When she slept, her dreams were bright and beautiful.
"Put on your white organdy by all means," advised Diana. They were in Anne's room. Outside, the evening was soft and green, with a clear sky and a bright moon. Inside, a lamp was lit. Anne's room was now a lovely place, not bare like before. It had soft green curtains and pretty apple blossom wallpaper. There were pictures, Miss Stacy's photo, and fresh white lilies that smelled sweet. A white bookcase held many books, and there was a comfy chair and a pretty dressing table. Anne was getting ready for a concert at the White Sands Hotel. The hotel guests planned the concert to help the Charlottetown Hospital. Many local people would perform. Anne Shirley and Laura Spencer would recite poems. Anne was very excited. Matthew was so proud of Anne. Marilla was proud too, though she would not say it. She just said young people should not go to the hotel alone without an older person. Anne and Diana would go with Jane Andrews and her brother Billy in their buggy. Other Avonlea boys and girls were going too. Some visitors from town were expected. After the concert, there would be supper for the performers. "Do you really think the organdy will be best?" Anne asked. "I don't think it's as pretty as my blue-flowered muslin, and it's not so modern." "But it suits you much better," Diana said. "It's so soft and pretty. The muslin is stiff. The organdy looks like it was made for you." Anne sighed and agreed. Diana was good at choosing clothes, and many people asked for her advice. Diana looked pretty herself in a pink dress, a color Anne could not wear. But Diana was not performing, so her clothes were not as important. All her care was for Anne,
who Diana said must look perfect for Avonlea. Pull out that frill a little more. So, here, let me tie your sash. Now for your slippers. I'm going to braid your hair in 2 thick braids and tie them halfway up with big white bows. No, don't pull out a single curl over your forehead, just have the soft part. There is no way you do your hair suits you so well, Anne. And Mrs. Allen says you look like a Madonna when you part it so. I shall fasten this little white house rose just behind your ear. There was just one on my bush, and I saved it for you. Shall I put my pearl beads on? Anne asked. Matthew brought me a string from town last week, and I know he'd like to see them on me. Diana thought for a moment, then said yes. She tied the pearl beads around Anne's slim white neck. There's something so stylish about you, Anne, Diana said with honest admiration. You hold your head so well. I suppose it's your figure. I am just a dumpling. I've always been afraid of it, and now I know it is so. Well, I suppose I shall just have to resign myself to it. But you have such dimples, Anne said, smiling at Diana's pretty face. Lovely dimples, like little dents in cream. I have given up all hope of dimples. My dimple dream will never come true, but so many of my dreams have that I mustn't complain. Am I all ready now? All ready, Diana said, as Marilla came to the door. Marilla's hair was grayer, but her face was softer. Come right in and look at our speaker, Marilla. Doesn't she look lovely? Marilla made a small sound.
She looks neat and proper. I like that way of fixing her hair. But I expect she'll ruin that dress driving there in the dust and dew with it, and it looks most too thin for these damp nights. Organdy's the most unserviceable stuff in the world anyhow, and I told Matthew so when he got it. But there is no use in saying anything to Matthew nowadays. Time was when he would take my advice, but now he just buys things for Anne regardless, and the clerks at Carmody know they can palm anything off on him. Just let them tell him a thing is pretty and fashionable, and Matthew plunks his money down for it. Mind you, keep your skirt clear of the wheel, Anne, and put your warm jacket on. Then Marilla went downstairs, feeling proud of how sweet Anne looked. She wished she could go to the concert to hear her girl recite. I wonder if it is too damp for my dress, Anne said anxiously. Not a bit of it, Diana said, pulling up the window blind. It's a perfect night, and there won't be any dew. Look at the moonlight. I'm so glad my window looks east into the sun rising, Anne said, going to Diana. It's so splendid to see the morning coming up over those long hills and glowing through those sharp fir tops. It's new every morning, and I feel as if I washed my very soul in that bath of earliest sunshine. Oh, Diana, I love this little room so dearly. I don't know how I'll get along without it when I go to town next month. Don't speak of your going away tonight, begged Diana. I don't want to think of it. It makes me so miserable, and I do want to have a good time this evening. What are you going to recite, Anne? And are you nervous? Not a bit. I've recited so often in public, I don't mind at all now. I've decided to give The Maiden's Vow. It's so pathetic. Laura Spencer is going to give a comic recitation, but I'd rather make people cry than laugh. What will you recite if they encore you? They won't dream of encoring me, Anne laughed. But she secretly hoped they would, and she imagined telling Matthew about it at breakfast. There are Billy and Jane now. I hear the wheels. Come on. Billy Andrews wanted Anne to sit with him in the front of the buggy, so she climbed up, but she wished she could sit with the other girls. Billy was a big, quiet young man. He didn't talk much, but he liked Anne a lot and was proud to drive her. Anne talked to the girls behind her and sometimes to Billy, who just grinned. She still enjoyed the ride. Many buggies were on the road, all going to the hotel. Laughter filled the air. When they reached the hotel, it was bright with many lights. Ladies from the concert group met them. One lady took Anne to the performer's dressing room. It was full of people from Charlottetown. Anne suddenly felt shy and scared. Her dress, which looked so pretty at home, now seemed too simple. The other ladies wore silk, lace, and diamonds.
Anne's small white rose looked plain next to their fancy flowers. Anne put her hat and jacket away and hid in a corner. She wished she was back at Green Gables. It was even worse on the stage in the big concert hall. Bright electric lights hurt her eyes. She smelled many perfumes and felt confused. She wished she was in the audience with Diana and Jane, who looked like they were having a good time. Anne sat between a big lady in pink silk and a tall girl in a white lace dress. The big lady looked at Anne often through her glasses. The white lace girl talked loudly to her friend. She spoke about country people in the audience. She expected to laugh at the local performers. Anne felt she would always dislike that white lace girl. A professional speaker, Mrs. Evans, was also at the hotel and would recite. She was a beautiful woman in a shining gray dress, with jewels on her neck and in her dark hair. Her voice was amazing, and the audience loved her. Anne forgot her worries and watched with shining eyes. But when Mrs. Evans finished, Anne suddenly put her hands over her face. She felt she could never recite after that, never. She wished she was home. At this bad moment, her name was called. Anne stood up, feeling dizzy. She was so pale that Diana and Jane in the audience held each other's hands. Anne had terrible stage fright. She had recited before, but never for such a grand audience. The sight of them made her unable to move or speak. Everything was so strange, so bright, so confusing. The ladies in fancy dresses, the judging faces, the feeling of wealth and culture around her. This was very different from the simple benches at the debating club, with the kind faces of friends. These people, she thought, would judge her harshly. Perhaps, like the white lace girl, they expected to laugh at her simple performance. She felt ashamed and miserable. Her knees trembled, her heart beat fast. A terrible faintness came over her. She could not say a word. She wanted to run away. But then she looked at the audience. She saw Gilbert Blythe at the back of the room. He was leaning forward with a smile. Anne thought his smile was proud and teasing. Gilbert was just enjoying the show, but Anne didn't see that. He was sitting next to Josie Pye, whose face was indeed proud and teasing. Anne took a long breath and lifted her head. Courage filled her like an electric shock. She would not fail in front of Gilbert Blythe. He should never be able to laugh at her. Her fear and nervousness vanished. She began to recite. Her clear, sweet voice reached to the farthest corner of the room without a shake or a break. She was calm again, and she recited better than ever before. When she finished, people clapped loudly. Anne walked back to her seat, blushing with shyness and delight. The big lady in pink silk shook her hand strongly. "My dear, you did splendidly. I've been crying like a baby, actually, I have. They're encoring you. They're bound to have you back." "Oh, I can't go," Anne said, confused. "But yet I must, or Matthew will be disappointed. He said they would encore me." "Then don't disappoint Matthew," said the pink lady, laughing. Smiling and blushing, Anne went back to the stage. She gave a short, funny poem that the audience loved even more. The rest of the evening was a success for her. When the concert was over, the big pink lady, who was the wife of a rich American, helped Anne. She introduced Anne to everyone, and they were all very kind. Mrs. Evans, the professional speaker, talked to Anne. She told Anne that she had a charming voice and performed her poems beautifully. Even the white lace girl gave Anne a small compliment. They had supper in a big, beautiful dining room. Diana and Jane were invited too because they came with Anne. Billy was gone. He had gone away, afraid of such an invitation. But he was waiting outside with the buggy when the three girls came out into the calm, white moonlight. Anne breathed deeply and looked into the clear sky. "Wasn't that a wonderful time?" Jane sighed as they drove away. I just wish I was a rich American. I would spend my summer at a hotel and wear jewels and fancy dresses and have ice cream and chicken salad every blessed day. I'm sure it would be ever so much more fun than teaching school. Anne, your recitation was simply great. Although I thought at first you were never going to begin. I think it was better than Mrs. Evans's. Oh no, don't say things like that, Jane, Anne said quickly, because it sounds silly. It couldn't be better than Mrs. Evans's, for she's a professional and I'm only a schoolgirl with a little knack of reciting. I'm quite satisfied if the people just liked mine pretty well. I've a compliment for you, Anne, said Diana. At least, I think it must be a compliment because of the tone he said it in. Part of it was, anyhow. There was an American sitting behind Jane and me, such a romantic-looking man with coal-black hair and eyes. Josie Pye says he's a distinguished artist and that her mother's cousin in Boston is married to a man that used to go to school with him. Well, we heard him say, didn't we, Jane? Who is that girl on the platform with the splendid Titian hair? She has a face I should like to paint. There now, Anne. But what does Titian hair mean? Being interpreted, it means plain red, I guess, laughed Anne. Titian was a very famous artist who liked to paint red-headed women. Did you see all the diamonds those ladies wore? Sighed Jane. They were simply dazzling. Wouldn't you just love to be rich, girls? We are rich, Anne said strongly. Why, we have 16 years to our credit, and we're happy as queens, and we've all got imaginations, more or less. Look at that sea, girls, all silver and shadow and vision of things not seen. We couldn't enjoy its loveliness any more if we had millions of dollars and ropes of diamonds. You wouldn't change into any of those women if you could. Would you want to be that white lace girl and wear a sour look all your life, as if you'd been born turning up your nose at the world? Or the pink lady, kind and nice as she is, so stout and short that you'd really no figure at all? Or even Mrs. Evans, with that sad, sad look in her eyes. She must have been dreadfully unhappy sometime to have such a look. You know you wouldn't, Jane Andrews. I don't know, exactly, said Jane, not fully convinced. I think diamonds would comfort a person for a good deal. Well, I don't want to be anyone but myself, even if I go uncomforted by diamonds all my life, declared Anne. I'm quite satisfied to be Anne of Green Gables with my string of pearl beads. I know Matthew gave me as much love with them as ever went with Madame the Pink Lady's jewels.
Thank you for spending time with us. I hope this story brought you peace and reflection. We will see you soon.